Today is Wednesday, August 26, 2026. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. Dolly Parton dies at the age of 80. Family released a statement last night. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. You can always email us your thoughts, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. Glad you're here with us, getting through the news of the day. We're here each and every weekday, bright and early, doing just that. With me today, CBN's Billy Hallowell and Trey Goins-Phillips. And on the focus story, California parents are taking a fight over religious education all the way to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, at least that's their goal. So we'll see if the Supreme Court decides to take up this, yet again, another attack on religion. So we'll get to the details here in just a few minutes.
All right, that's coming up. Also coming up on the main thing, when does artificial intelligence stop being a tool and start becoming something far more dangerous? Billy's got a look at that coming up on the main thing. And with that, we are going to go to the news in 90 seconds. And President Trump just scored a major election year victory at the Supreme Court, clearing a key legal roadblock in a push for tighter controls on mail-in voting ahead of November's midterms. In a 6-3 decision, the court paused a lower court injunction that had prevented the administration from implementing portions of Trump's March executive order in 23 mostly Democratic-led states and Washington, D.C. The order directs the Department of Homeland Security to compile state-by-state lists of adult U.S. citizens. It also calls for new federal requirements surrounding mail-in ballots, including identifying marks and barcodes on ballot envelopes and a system designed to ensure mail ballots are delivered only to eligible voters. But this is not a final ruling on whether Trump's plan is constitutional. The court said the state's challenge came too early and explicitly left the door open to future lawsuits over whatever the administration ultimately implements. And the Trump administration is now launching what it calls an economic D-Day against Iran in an effort to choke off Tehran's remaining financial lifelines, while warning that military action is still very much on the table. And the bigger threat may be aimed at everyone doing business with Iran. Meanwhile, Iran is responding with threats of its own, warning of seismic retaliation and saying countries that participate in the sanctions would be considered an act of war. And America has lost one of its most beloved voices. Dolly Parton has died at the age of 80 following what her team says was a brief battle with cancer. Parton died Tuesday at Vanderbilt Ingram Cancer Center in Nashville, 4 days after being admitted. Her team says she was surrounded by loved ones. The specific type of cancer has not yet been disclosed. Her nephew, Brian Seaver, announced the news on behalf of the family. Take a listen to part of that statement.
It is an honor that is mixed with absolute pride and great sadness. But sadness lies with us, not with Dolly. Dolly has lived in the light and is in the arms of Jesus, surely met by Carl, her parents, and countless others who have watched her and longed for her to meet them in the heavens. I first went on the road with Dolly as a kid, getting a taste of the road life in the early 1980s. Dolly opened doors not just for me, but for her entire family to reach the potential we didn't even know was possible. Dolly also opened doors for generations of singers, songwriters, musicians, and dreamers from every walk of life and across every continent. By her example, we believe that anything was possible.
Her team went on to remember her not only for her music, but for a lifetime of generosity, including the hundreds of millions of books distributed through her Imagination Library and her support for medical research. Ann Parton's Christian faith remained central throughout her life after losing her husband Carl in 2025 following nearly 60 years of marriage. She said her faith gave her confidence she would see him again. From singing in church as a child in Tennessee to becoming one of the biggest stars in country music, Dolly Parton never stopped publicly pointing back to that faith. And we at CBN reported multiple times over some of her faith comments that she said in public. One of them being just a few years ago when she was 77 years old. She said she felt very led to write one particular song on the album called World on Fire. And then in one verse, she sings, "I don't know what to think about us. When did we lose? In God we trust. God Almighty, what are we going to do if God ain't listening and we're deaf too?" So she goes on in this one and has talked about her faith numerous times. And Parton had been outspoken about her faith for years. She said in a recent interview, "My faith impacts everything that I do because I do believe that through God, all things are possible. And so I always ask God to bless everything that I do and the people that I work with, and to bring all the right things and right people into my life and to take the wrong ones out." Actually, Billy and Raj do a great job of breaking that down. I'm going to put the YouTube link in the description of this podcast episode. Make sure you check that out. There's a lot we can talk about, and I'm sure people will unpack it, their interactions with her over the years and the kindness and generosity she's shown, and more importantly, the faith in Christ that she professed. So prayers for her family and for all of her loved ones there as they mourn her losses. This, even though she was 80 and lived a good life, this obviously came upon suddenly within the last few weeks of her being ill. And so prayers definitely go out to them for sure. All right, want to go to the focus story now. And as we mentioned there a few moments ago, a group of Christian parents is asking the Supreme Court to take up their case after California charter schools rejected religious materials from their homeschool programs. Parents say it's religious discrimination. So tell me about this one.
Yeah, so this is an interesting case. There's three families: the Woolward family, the Gonzalez family, and Carrie Dodson is a family member who's listed on this challenge. So they're asking the U.S. Supreme Court to take up a case, a challenge to a California policy that bans charter schools from funding or granting academic credit for religious materials used in homeschool-style independent study programs that are happening privately. The dispute traces back actually to October 2023, a lawsuit then that was filed after charter schools rejected works, academic works by William Penn and Jonathan Edwards, plus some curricula developed by Bob Jones University, a Christian university, on the grounds that it was all religious content, and the government cannot be in any way funding something that could be deemed as religious content. Never mind the fact that, of course, a lot of these documents that these organizations, these parents were wanting to use are foundational to the founding of the United States. I mean, Jonathan Edwards is a significant figure in the history of the United States. Same with William Penn. And their argument was, this is it. Yes, it's from a Christian perspective because this is a homeschool situation. We are Christians and we want to pass that ideology on to our children. But also, this is just foundational to the formation of the United States. Setting that aside, though, California said, nope, this is religious content, and we have the separation of church and state, and us giving you any money is us endorsing a religion.
And we've talked about that. We're going to talk about it again, but how have the courts ruled on this one so far?
Yeah, so a federal district court initially ruled against the families, and last September, a unanimous three-judge panel of the Ninth Circuit upheld that previous decision. Judge Andrew Hurwitz's opinion, leaning on the Supreme Court's 2022 Carson v. Macon precedent, reasoned that the extensive legal requirements governing charter programs makes them sufficiently public, so that excluding religious content, you can't do that, or excluding religious content is allowed, and that including religious content is something you should not be allowed to do. The families, of course, disagreed with that characterization. They argued that their independent study programs function more like a private school or a homeschooling situation rather than public schooling, and their bid for the full Ninth Circuit en banc is rehearing also failed. Then, of course, now pushing us to where we are today, which is petitioning the Supreme Court to take up this case.
And what happens next here? What can we expect going forward?
So the petition was just filed last week by the First Liberty Institute, along with a handful of other law firms, and First Liberty's attorney is arguing that parents should not be penalized for choosing state-compliant curricula simply because it's religious in nature or is funded by a Christian organization or it is in any way tied to faith. The Supreme Court is resuming its closed-door conferences in late September, September 28th, with its new term starting October 5th. So we could be hearing whether or not the Supreme Court may choose to take up this case as soon as sometime this fall.
It's just the conversation that California in particular is kind of one of these areas that's a little worse than others when it comes to Christians and how they treat Christians, particularly in schools. But the First Amendment requires government to be neutral toward religion, not hostile towards religion. And it seems like these sorts of actions are always, oh, we need to get it out, like get out the guns, and just every time we see it, we go to war and we charge, with 300 heavy horsemen, and we just see it and we got to stomp it out of here. It's like, no, that's not what the Constitution says at all. And you even said it, the separation of church and state is what they're arguing, which again, isn't in the Constitution. And it's the establishing of a religion. And we've talked about that. It's not establishing a religion to just, here and there support people who happen to be Christians and of faith when they want to exercise their freedom of speech and their freedom of religion, that just not hampering it. That's what you're supposed to do. And by helping them live the way they want to live and learn the way they want to learn, you're not establishing a religion. You're doing what the Constitution says.
Well, and I think that we're going to see a lot of these cases, especially in California, where you have, teachers who are fighting back on the pronoun stuff, where you've had the court rule on that. I think that really the chickens have come home to roost after COVID with parents and parental rights and education. And so because we don't have an education system that is thriving in this country, and yet we're the most powerful country in the world, that teamed with everything we learned during COVID about what was being taught, teamed with, I think, a lot of these, court cases that have left Christians in particular feeling very alarmed in these legal battles. I think we're going to see more and more of this. So it'll be interesting to see how this one shakes out.
Final thoughts, Trey?
Well, I think the irony here with this case and the ones that, to your point, Billy, I think are going to continue to crop up is that much of it is a response to the secular progressive religion that the state has foisted onto parents. And they've said, enough is enough. We don't want to do this. I've seen what's happening in the public school system. We're not exposing our kids to that. So we're either homeschooling, charter schooling, or private schooling. And then still, even in those places that should be protected, they're facing attacks like this. So we'll see what happens with this case in particular this fall.
All right. Appreciate the update on that one for sure. And stay tuned to cbnnews.com, faithwire.com for updates on that. All right. We are going to go to the main thing now. And as I mentioned earlier, AI is quickly changing how we work, how we communicate, and even in some cases, relationships and how we form those. So where should Christians draw the line? Ben Peterson joined CBN News and Billy with a simple framework for believers. And that conversation is today's main thing.
Artificial intelligence is taking over, it feels like, almost everything. And Ben, you have a new book called When Intelligence Isn't Human, Navigating Your Faith in the Age of AI. Now, this book, gosh, it couldn't come at a better time, but why did you write it? Why did you feel compelled to be the one to dive into this topic?
I really had zero interest in this. I'm just a combat infantry grunt guy that loves Jesus, and I work with the military as my day job. But the Holy Spirit wouldn't leave me alone, Billy. And then I started working on it. And then Secretary Hegseth came out and said, every young person in the military is going to be using AI every day. This is part of your job. And I was like, oh, all right, well, that's a young generation that is already spending 6 hours a day on technology, and their brains are being absolutely melted by AI and what it's building through Meta, one of the avenues. And so I was like, wow, okay, Lord, I hear you. And now here we are, and things are continuing to escalate.
When you look at AI, and maybe this is a tough question. I don't know. You'll have an answer, I'm sure. And a lot of people are panicked about it. They're like, this is the end of the world. This is horrible. We're going to lose jobs. People are going to be in chaos. And then the other side, this is amazing. People love it. It's, it's not that bad. Where do you fall?
Yeah, it's everything. I think it's honestly everything. And the reality of our world today is that everything comes back to what is the heart and intent of the creator, of the person who is actually leading it. And the leaders of artificial intelligence, where it's being proliferated the most powerfully with Grok, with OpenAI, with ChatGPT, with Meta, those men are the enemies of Christ. They do not follow Jesus. And Jesus said, if you're not for me, you're against me. These men are humanistic, evolutionary, survival of the fittest leaders that want to be God. And so when you have people like that are proliferating the most powerful technology in the history of the world, it's going to be Matthew 24. It's going to be the great deception. And so AI is totally autonomous. AI will become whatever you want it to become. That's why Logos can build a native AI software, and it can be a great tool. Companies can use it, and it can be a great tool. But what it comes down to is when it's impacting culture relationally and how it's deceiving young people into thinking they're in a real relationship, that's where we start to get into really dangerous territory.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, who's the mind behind it? And I think this is the one thing that has concerned me the most about AI is, yes, the job issue and all of that. But I'm also a firm believer that you can be really smart and figure out how to use AI to do your job better.
Yeah.
But who's controlling it? Who's programming it? Who is, and we finally have some Christian organizations that are doing some really good work on assessing how AI is handling theology, right? For instance, and how that's happening. So we're going to have to do a lot of work in that area. But then there are opportunities to use it to evangelize and all that. So we'll get into a little bit more of that in a moment. But the Pope recently spoke out about AI. And I know that you've looked at this, and there are positives maybe and negatives to what he said. Let's just start with the things you think maybe he got right, and you can just sort of give your assessment there.
Yeah, so the Pope came out with what's called Magnifica Humanitas, and it's really bringing us back to the future of humanity. And obviously the Pope and the Catholic Church has a 1 billion person reach. So them speaking out on this is a big deal. And I'm actually encouraged that they took such a strong stance. And one of the main areas is around AI and warfare. Right now, there are kill decisions being made in the war in Ukraine using autonomous warfare, where the computer is deciding who to kill. So we've reached the time where death is being, expanded, life is being taken in the world, not by humans or by animals, but by computers. And so he took a strong stance against that. I think it's a pie in the sky thing. This warfare is expanding dramatically. I'm connected to companies here in the United States that are planning on churning out thousands of drones a month for the Department of War. And so I'm glad that he took that stance, and it's going to be difficult to even be able to hold that. I love that he spoke out about, putting humanity first, and that it's really important that AI is not controlled by a small handful group of very wealthy people. When that has happened, especially as these very wealthy people have promised a utopia. The last really powerful men that promised utopias and actually went for it were Mao, Stalin, and Hitler, and they killed over 100 million people. And so whenever really wealthy, powerful people promise utopias and that there's going to be suffering before we get to the utopia, that is the alarm bells. And so I think the Pope nailed it in that arena of really warning against these people having so much control. Obviously, he spoke to protecting human labor, protecting human dignity. When a man has a job and he gets up in the morning and he has purpose, that's a big deal, right? So I'm glad that he spoke to that. We also have to seek the reality that there's in a capitalist world, everyone is going to find a way to make money and to beat everybody out, and AI gives you that edge. So I guess I would say, from a concept standpoint, he had some great points, but I think he missed some stark realities, and there's also some other elements that I think he absolutely did not catch.
Yeah, well, and I think when you look at this, I mean, is there anything else you want to add? You went through a lot there on what he maybe didn't catch. Are there other things that you would have liked to? I mean, you said some of them, but are there any other pieces to that puzzle you'd want to detail?
Oh, absolutely. The future of the youth of the world. So right now we have the highest rates of anxiety, depression, suicide that our world has ever seen in our youth. From 2010 to 2015 was the cultural adaptation of the smartphone, and youth suicide increased by 120% during that time. time. And so what's happening right now is young people are spending about 6 hours a day on social media, which is all built out by social media, which is built by AI algorithms. And those AI algorithms are designed to make this technology as addictive as humanly possible. And so you can say beyond a shadow of a doubt that the more technology you have in your life, the more isolated and depressed you're going to become. And these tech giants, that's the world that they want to create. They want you hooked in and in it 24/7. And so the future of our world, the future of youth, the future of what our generation is going to become hinges on the balance of our mental capacity, which is being drained and destroyed by technology. So I think he absolutely missed that. You also have how AI has strategically helped plan multiple mass shootings around the world, where there are dozens of families that have lost loved ones because AI and ChatGPT helped plan the mass shooting. And those allegations and those lawsuits are pending right now. You have dozens of young people that have committed suicide where ChatGPT has helped them plan their suicide or encourage them to do it. And this comes back to the mindset of these few tech giants. They ascribe to survival of the fittest thinking. And when you ascribe to survival of the fittest, it's whoever has the most offspring wins. It's whoever survives through the hard things wins. And when you don't follow Christ, don't believe in creation, and you ascribe to these humanistic things, you want to plan a mass shooting, let me help you do it. Like, none of those guardrails were put in place because they just believe, hey, what's right for you is right for you, and what's right for me is right for me. And that lack of absolute truth with the most powerful technology in the history of the world is devastating to the future of our country with young people.
No, absolutely. And that makes sense and needs to be addressed. How would you recommend that Christians use AI? Like, what are your warnings? Because a lot of people are going to say, I don't want to touch it at all. I don't want to be near it at all. Is that even a reality? Yeah.
So if you are on social media, you are using AI. If you use Google, you're using AI. So I think that's a little bit not realistic to just say, hey, I don't use AI. Yes, you do. If you have a smartphone, you are using AI. AI is assisting the use of your smartphone. And so this is what I'm really teaching people. And we now have on my site for the book, whenintelligenceisinhuman.com, we have a 5-week parent-teen guide for how to have discussions and how to set up really safe guardrails in your home. And we give that for free when you pre-order the book. But it's really how you build out the difference between a tool versus a guide and never a relationship. And let me say that again. AI is healthily used if it's a tool versus a guide and never a relationship. So when you go to ChatGPT and you say, hey, this is the organizational structure of my growing nonprofit, and I want to work through, based on our size and our revenue, each position that I have, and this is who we currently have, what do you think we need? AI can help you build out those systems. If you're a small business owner and you want to build out an app for your company, you can do that for pennies compared to what we used to cost tens of thousands of dollars. That is a phenomenal tool to be used in a competitive market. But when you turn to it as a guide to replace your God-given identity to be a creator, and you're going to AI to give you ideas, to give you vision, that's you losing your identity that Christ paid on the cross to give you, so that you can go and you can create things that can change the world. And then lastly, relationship. About 40% of Gen Z believes that speaking to a chatbot is like speaking to a pastor. And so they are seeing this relational connection that they can get from artificial intelligence that fits directly into Matthew 24 with the Great Deception. There is no technology that can ever replace a pastor, a relationship in your life. And so that's where I'm really trying to guide people. Tool versus guide, and never a relationship.
Well, that's important and it's powerful. And the book is When Intelligence Isn't Human, Navigating Your Faith in the Age of AI. You mentioned the website. Can you give the website again? Because the book comes out in August 25th. I want to make sure people go pre-order the book, check it out, mark their calendars for the release. Where can they go to do that again? Yeah, so it's whenintelligenceisn'thuman.com. And it's all about how do you navigate your faith in this new age of AI. And in the book, I really help you understand this is how the world is changing. This is what you need to be prepared for. Navy SEALs spend 18 months getting ready to go to war.
And I'm here to tell you guys, in the next 18 months, our world is never going to be the same. And so do you want to start honing in your relationship with God and understanding this enemy that's really building in our lives in 18 months, or do you want to start now? And that's where I really feel called to prepare the church with these tools.
All right, Billy, appreciate that conversation there. And that's going to leave us with time on the podcast today for one last thing. Going to look at Daniel 2:21. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. Just a reminder that God is sovereign over all things, and that no matter which person's in control, which party's in control, how things are going and not, God is using those things. He's working all things that are happening together for good for those who love him. So a great reminder for us today.
Yeah, especially when you're struggling, when you're dealing with things, just knowing that you can rest in him and trust in him, really, really comforting.
Yeah, we should be aware of what's going on in the world around us, but we should not fear, because God is faithful and he's sovereign to carry out his purposes and his plan.
All right, amen and amen. Good spot to leave it on this edition of the Quick Start Podcast. Get yourself on over to cbnnews.com and faithwire.com. Make them daily stops and get your news from a Christian perspective. God bless. See you back here tomorrow.